All right, this is chapter 21, section 3, Central European Monarchs Clash. And today's objectives summarize the 30 Years' War and the formation of the Central European states. The main idea. After a period of turmoil, absolute monarchs ruled Austria and the Germanic state of Prussia. And why does this matter now? Prussia built a strong military tradition in Germany that contributed in part to two world wars in the 20th century. All right, some terms and names we're going to go over. The 30 Years' War, Maria Theresa, Frederick the Great, and the 7 Years' War. All right, so Central European monarchs class. For a brief while, the German rulers appeared to have settled their religious differences through the Peace of Augsburg, and that was in 1555, I believe. We went over that in a previous lesson. They had agreed that the faith of each prince would determine the religion of his subjects. So whatever that prince controlled, whatever land he controlled, he would decide the religion they were going to worship. That sounds outrageous. What happens if I told you you had to be Jewish or Muslim or Christian? You'd probably say, Mr. H, you're out of your mind. All right, churches in Germany would be either Lutheran or Catholic, but not Calvinist. Those are all different types of Christianity, if you were wondering. The peace was short-lived, soon to be replaced by a long war. Obviously, I wonder why. After the Peace of Augsburg, the Catholic and the Lutheran princes of each Germany watched each other suspiciously. 30 Years' War. Both the Lutheran and the Catholic princes tried to gain followers. In addition, both sides felt threatened by Calvinism, which was spreading in Germany and gaining many followers. As tensions mounted, the Lutherans joined together in the Protestant Union in 1608. The following year, the Catholic princes formed the Catholic League. Now it would take only a spark to set off a bloody war. All right, so that spark came in 1618. The future Holy Roman Emperor, Ferdinand II, was head of the Habsburgs family. As such, he ruled the Czech kingdom of Bohemia. And the Protestants in Bohemia did not trust Ferdinand, who was a foreigner and a Catholic. So when he closed some Protestant churches, the Protestants revolted. Ferdinand sent an army to Bohemia to crush the revolt. Yeah, that's going to work out. Several German Protestant princes took this chance to challenge their Catholic emperor. Thus began the 30 Years' War, a conflict over religion and territory and for power among European ruling families. The war can be divided into two main phases, the phase of Habsburg's triumph and the phase of Habsburg's defeat. So a little bit of winning and a little bit of losing. The 30 Years' War lasted from 1618 to 1648, and during the first 12 years, the Habsburgs' armies from Austria and Spain crushed the troops hired by the Protestant princes. They succeeded by putting down the Czech uprising, and they also defeated the German Protestants who had supported the Czechs. Ferdinand paid his army of 125,000 men, by allowing them to plunder or rob villages, German villages. Man, this Ferdinand guy doesn't sound like he's very nice. This huge army destroyed everything in its path. The Protestant Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden. Man, how do you say that name? Gustavus Adolphus. Gustavus Adolphus. The Protestant Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden and his disciplined army of 23,000 shifted the tide of the war in 1630. So they were going to drive these Habsburg armies out of northern Germany. But however, Aldavius was killed in a battle in 1632. Cardinal Richelieu and Cardinal Mazarin of France, we talked about both these guys in our previous lesson, dominated the remaining years of the war. And although Catholic, these two cardinals feared the Habsburgs more than the Protestants. They did not want other European rulers to have as much power as the French king. Now remember, the French king was Louis XIV, the baller, the guy who was spending all that money. He had 100 people dressing him up. He had a bunch of wigs. He was only like 5 foot tall, but he looked like he was 7 foot tall. All right, therefore, in 1635, Richelieu sent French troops to join the Germans and the Swedish Protestants in their struggle against the Habsburgs army. Okay, so the French are going to come in to join the German and Swedish Protestants. Because, like I said, the Habsburgs were starting to take control of Germany, but they were getting pushed out too. All right, so you got a bunch of religious ideas. You got a bunch of countries saying what religion you should follow. What you need to know is that the war did great damage to Germany. And that's going to be this red border you see here is the outline of Germany. Its population dropped from 20 million to about 16 million. Both trade and agriculture were disrupted, and Germany's economy was ruined. Germany had a long, difficult recovery from this devastation. And that is a major reason it did not become unified until the 1800s. Okay, the Peace of Westphalia in 1648 ended the war. The treaty had these important consequences. It weakened the Habsburg states of Spain and Austria. It weakened Germany. It strengthened France by awarding it German territory, made German princes independent of the Holy Roman Emperor, and it ended religious wars in Europe. Introduced a new method of peace negotiation whereby all participants meet to settle the problems of war and decide the terms. This method is actually still used today. Dutch free of Spain, the treaty banned the idea that the Catholic Empire would rule most of Europe. Began an era of nation-states recognizing Europe as a group of equal independent states. And basically, the Catholic Church loses control of Europe. So there's a lot of changes going on in Europe during this time. Beginning of the modern states. The treaty abandoned the idea that a Catholic empire that would rule most of Europe. It recognized Europe as a group of equal independent states. So they're all different. This marked the beginning of the modern state system and was the most important result of the 30 Years' War. So it started the modern state system. That's the most important thing you have to remember. And all this war. It's a long war. 30 Years' War. It's a long war. Strong states formed more slowly in Central Europe than Western Europe. The major powers of this region were the Kingdom of Poland, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire. None of them was very strong until the mid-1600s. One reason for this is that the economy of Central Europe developed differently from that of Western Europe. And during the late Middle Ages, serfs in Western Europe slowly won freedom and moved to towns. There they joined the middle-class townspeople, who gained economic power because of the commercial revolution and development of capitalism. By contrast, the landowning aristocracy in Central Europe passed laws restricting the ability of serfs to gain freedom and move to cities. Oh, man. The nobles wanted to keep the serfs on the land where they could produce large harvests, and the nobles could then sell the surplus crops to Western Europe cities for a great profit. That's a good business plan for them. for the nobles, but not the serfs. And if you guys remember what capitalism is, the United States is a capitalistic society. We buy and sell and trade goods. The government does not control the type of business we do. You are free to create your own business as long as it's legal. Legal, being legal here. And you're able to buy and sell as long as you're doing and paying taxes and tariffs if you're doing overseas shipments. That is capitalism broken down for you. We are a capitalist society. It's more of a modern take on things. The landowning nobles of Central Europe not only held down the serfs, but also blocked the development of strong kings. For example, the Polish nobility elected a Polish king and sharply limited his power. They allowed the king little income, no law courts, and no standing army. Man, that sounds ridiculous. Can't do anything. As a result, there was not a strong ruler who could form a unified state. Duh, of course not. The two empires of Central Europe were also weak. Although Suleiman the Magnificent had conquered Hungary and threatened Vienna in 1529, the Ottoman Empire could not take its European conquest any further. From then on, the Ottoman Empire declined from its peak of power. So the Ottoman Empire was killing it. And let's see, 1300s, and I guess by 1600s, it's going to slowly lose control of these areas, which was the Mediterranean Sea. And this is very important because the Mediterranean Sea goes out into the ocean. If you control this land, your trade is going to be outstanding. Your empire is probably going to be amazing. Okay, so it says right here, 1683. The Ottoman Empire was at its extent. All right, so the Ottoman Empire was only just around these areas in the early 1300s and 1400s, but then it expanded. But the Ottoman Empire was going to be crushed by World War I, which we will get into later. The Ottoman Empire was also known as, I don't know if they recognize themselves as this, but it's the Persians, if you will. In addition, the Holy Roman Empire was seriously weakened by the 30 Years' War. No longer able to command the obedience of the German states, the Holy Roman Empire had no real power. These old weakened empires of kingdoms left power vacuum in Central Europe. So it left a power vacuum. In the late 1600s, two German-speaking families decided to try to fill this vacuum by becoming absolute rulers themselves. So with the power vacuum, all the power goes right up. It's all gone. It gets vacuumed up. So this is a perfect time for two rulers to come in and seize the opportunity to take control of these areas. All right, so we will get into this tomorrow or our next lesson. Hopefully you learned something. I know European history is quite a lot to take in, but it is fascinating, and the results of it have led us to where we are today. All right, hopefully you learned something. Peace out.